Welcome into This Has to Work. Today I am joined by Ian Hoppe. Ian is the founder and CEO of Conduit, an electrical design and engineering software that standardizes and digitizes electrical data and can be used in the field and in real time by electricians, engineers, and project managers, eliminating static, expense, and bulky CAD blueprints. Conduit allows complicated electrical projects to be documented, shared, and modified in a seamless platform spanning web, mobile, and API integrations. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Matt. Glad to be here.
That was a mouthful, but I think it really takes a mouthful to talk about all the things that Conduit does. So let's jump right into this. You worked as an electrical contractor for several years, and during that time, you noticed there was a pretty significant need to build better electrical diagrams. For the audience, how have electrical contractors designed and illustrated electrical systems in the past?
So, thanks for that intro. So I come out of the electrical industry, and a lot of what I used to do was doing data collection about real-world electrical systems. So the process was generally, and before I start there, like, why are we doing this? Why are we collecting electrical system information? And when I say electrical infrastructure information, I mean like panels, transformers, stuff you find in the electrical rooms and how they're all connected, all the way back to the utility connection, Alabama Power or Florida Power and Light, whoever it may be. And if you think about a building, you've got all these wires and pipes and equipment throughout that are serving all of the lights and motors that make a building hum. So we're doing the collection on this for a couple different reasons. One, if you're going to add on to a facility, you got to know what's there in the first place. And two, we're doing something very unsexy, but very important, called arc flash analysis. And it has to do with OSHA compliance. And OSHA says that at any given piece of equipment, like a panel, there's a certain amount of potential energy that's available at that piece of equipment. And given that amount of potential energy, you need to be wearing a certain amount of PPE if you're working on it, right? So that may be a flame-resistant shirt like the one I'm wearing.
Personal protection equipment,
right?
For the non-initiated.
Yeah. Yes, not the mask though. So this is like I've got a flame-retardant shirt on right now, or it might be something. If it's a big, huge piece of equipment, it might be something like a bomb suit. It looks like a bomb suit.
And arc flash, for anybody who doesn't know, effectively is an explosion.
It is an explosion,
an electrical explosion.
An electrical explosion that vaporizes copper. It's like the surface of the sun kind of heat.
That sounds bad.
It's real bad, and if you should go on YouTube and look up examples of it, it's heinous, and it's really crazy. So so they literally wear bomb suits like the ones they like defuse bombs with. If you're working on a huge piece of equipment, but the only reason you know that you need to be wearing that amount of personal protection equipment is by doing the math. Right, and in order to do the math, you have to have all the variables, and all the variables are how this electrical system is put together. So that's what I was doing this data collection. And the process was usually me walking into a facility and saying, "Hey, Mr. Maintenance Director, where are your electrical as-builts?" And he would say, "I don't have any records of my electrical system. I have a bunch of old drawings under Bob's desk. The rest of it lives in Bob's head. Good luck." And I would start where the power company hits the side of the building.
The really bad news is if Bob had retired and or died.
Yeah, if you stepped off a
it's
curb,
gone.
Yeah,
it's gone.
And he knows everything, and that was frequently an occurrence where you get out there and start looking at stuff, and there's this panel that Bob never named. He added himself on a weekend and put in this closet, and nobody even knows where it comes from or where it goes. It's a very frequent occurrence, particularly and I was working primarily in large, complex, high-stakes electrical systems, hospitals, industrial plants, places like that, places where it's lives or dollars lost if something goes wrong in the electrical system.
So best case scenario, these were on very specific computer-aided design or CAD drawings. Worst case scenario, it was in Bob's head, right? And anywhere in between. And likely to be anywhere between. And we're not just talking about like some small manufacturing facility. We're talking about major operations for major companies in big facilities where this happens all the time.
I did this on the south side of Birmingham over here at St. Vincent's Hospital.
Yeah.
And in all the hospitals.
Right.
There is it is likely that when you are laying on that operating table and you look up and see the lights, there's somebody doesn't quite know how to turn those off and on.
But even in the best case scenario, which now sounds terrible, but even in the best case scenario, those things lived in kind of a static environment.
Right.
So somebody changed something, like the example you gave before, somebody rewired a panel or somebody added a circuit to a panel. That probably never made it back to that
any
drawing.
Kind of central record. Absolutely not. So a lot of times what it is, you have this like, because when you design the building, you create what's called design documents or contract documents that an engineer says, here's how you're you're supposed to build the building. At the end of construction, you create what are called as-built. And the contractor says, this is how we actually built the building. And the difference between the two of those things is the fog of war that is construction, right? But as time goes on, both of those records get more and more and more out of date as you add stuff, you change circuits, et cetera. Those are all individual projects. They may have drawings associated with them, they may not, but they usually just get piled on top of these old drawings.
So even if you had an absolutely anal retentive, facility owner or safety manager or whatever the case may be, they still have to either have CAD drawings redrawn, or they have to update documents, which again just creates another static document. And all of that sounds expensive and inefficient. So this is kind of where Conduit starts to come in with single line diagrams and other things that you guys are doing. So you talk a little bit about what you're doing and why that's a huge leap forward.
Yeah. So the way that this used to work is I would start where the power company hits the side of the building. I would trace this cascade of electrical equipment, hundreds of pieces of equipment over many floors, and I would draw it by hand on a big sheet of paper I took out there with me. So I would pull a piece of 24 by 36 paper out of the plotter, and I would start drawing what's called an industry standard format called a single line diagram. That is sort of an abstracted representation of the electrical system. It's like the guts of the electrical system, and I would take a ton of pictures with my phone, and then I would have to go back to the office and redraw it in AutoCAD and put it into some old analysis software to crunch the numbers for the arc flash analysis. And then I'd make a big report, hundreds of pages in Microsoft Word, with all my photos and notes and analysis, and I print it out and I put it in a binder, and I take it back to the maintenance director, and he puts it under his desk and never thinks about it again. That was kind of like the ongoing sort of like circular every 4 to 5 years, you go do this at these big facilities. So a tremendous amount of like wasted time and resources and effort. Actually, so like my whole family are all electrical people. So as I was leaving, I went to school, and I didn't end up with an engineering degree. I ended up with a different kind of degree. And my dad, who's an electrical engineer and who had like set me on this path, was like, dude, what the hell? Like, you didn't, I thought we were doing this.
Yeah.
And so I went and worked in journalism.
I set you up for a really great career.
Yeah.
That was going to make you good money, very stable, always in demand, and you kind of took a left turn.
Well, I'm like, my whole family are all electrical. All my uncles are all electrical engineers. My dad's an engineer. My grandfather was an electrician. Like, everybody's just electrical. And so I was like, I'm not doing electrical. I'm getting out of here. So I went and worked in journalism for like 7 years. My dad was like, you'll be back. And he was right. And so like, back in 2019, I was learning how to code like kind of nights and weekends for the journalism stuff. And I started building in my spare time, because I knew this process very well. I started building a tablet application that walks somebody through the collection of all this electrical system information, validating what they're putting in, making sure it's correct and complete, and then saving it in the cloud in this industry standard single line diagram format, along with associated notes and photos of that equipment. And the idea is that as this real world system changes, which they do very frequently, it's super easy to update this digital record because it's in the palm of your hand for the first time ever. Right? It's always been on like an AutoCAD drawing on a Microsoft machine, right? So now it's in the palm of your hand and you can update it very quickly and easily. And so next time an engineer walks in here and goes, hey man, where are your as-builts? You just share this record with them. And it's got everything you need. And also, if we collect with enough granularity and get all the stuff we need to, we can crunch the numbers ourselves, and we don't have to use this old electrical engineering software to crunch these numbers for arc flash.
Sure.
Right? And they're always OSHA compliant. Which is a big deal because they're never OSHA compliant. They're always behind. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started building in 2019. 2020 come around, like the rest of the world, I quit my job, started working on this full time. Techstars shows up in Birmingham with an energy tech accelerator, which was serendipitous, right? I knew the managing director because I covered him in his startup when I was under the business desk as a journalist, and he invited me to apply. So that was life changing. And it gave me the resources to really like jump off on this and start working on it. And then raised a pre-seed round at a program in 2021 led by you guys and Overland Venture Capital.
Yeah, it was interesting watching kind of the evolution of the product, but in essence, it started from these designs, these drawings, these documents, the documentation, the as-built, all of that stuff is just fundamentally flawed because it's hard to update. It's expensive to update potentially because it may require a draftsman to do it, and they're not free.
Well, it requires an engineer. So this is a frequent analogy I use. So you know how Figma ate Adobe's lunch, right? So they basically said, well, previously, if I wanted some wireframes for my website that I'm building, I have to hire somebody that knows Adobe Illustrator to draw this for me because Adobe Illustrator is difficult to use and it's expensive, right? So I hire somebody, a designer, to build these wireframes. Well, Figma came around and said, no, we're going to make tools that everybody can build wireframes quickly and easily in just a few minutes. That like wrecked Adobe because they had this like monopoly on this expensive, difficult software. Well, our customers, electrical contractors, electricians, they right now pay engineers $200 an hour to draw them stuff in AutoCAD because AutoCAD is difficult to use and expensive, and they don't want to learn to use it. So they pay these engineers to do these as-builds for them. What we're doing is basically the Figma of the electrical industry. We're giving design tools to the masses, democratizing design, and giving them, for the first time, engineering tools in the palm of their hands.
So top to bottom, this has application not just for the field technician who's documenting this, but it also rolls up into whoever is managing the project. If it's a general contractor to the general, or to the subcontractor to general contractor to developer or owner, or whatever the case may be. And because these things are dynamic and digital and cloud-based, everybody theoretically could have access to these things. And if a change is made, it is changed dynamically, not statically. So in other words, everybody's stuff updates at the same time when it's actually changed. So again, this idea of going from this static to this dynamic kind of model is important. You talked a little bit, and I think people generally understand. If they live in a home or they work in a building, they understand the general concept, at least intuitively, of an electrical system and everything that you're talking about. But you're not just working with kind of structural engineers and structural electrical systems. You guys have started to support more of the EV infrastructure build out that's happening, whether it's charging stations or other things. Can you talk a little bit about how that's being used in the field specifically, or how Conduit's being used specifically among the kind of the EV work that's happening?
Yeah, great question. So we kind of found this unexpected traction in the EV space. I guess looking back now, it shouldn't have been unexpected. I just didn't know a whole lot about it. And it was after the first year in 2022 when one of our customers, now our largest customer, came to us and said, "Hey, could you help us with these EV charger installations?" And at the time, I hadn't thought much about it at all. But it turns out behind the installation of every single one of these chargers going in every parking lot in the world over the next 10 years, and really every electrification upgrade that's going on, that is a heat pump or a upgraded water pump, water heater, solar, commercial solar arrays on a roof. Behind the installation of every single one of these, there is an electrician or an engineer standing there with an out-of-date single line of this facility trying to figure out how to fit this new gear into a 1970s electrical system that nobody kept track of. And like that's what we do. We were really good at that. And so we really started focusing on that in 2022. And what it comes down to, I mean, we are not a tool for EV charger deployment. EV charger deployment is just a very happening part of electrical work right now. Really installing an EV charger is just a new piece of equipment in a building.
Well, and there's unique challenges with that, right? So it's 100% field work. The footprint of these places is not that large, but the amount of these charging stations, for example, that are going to be installed over the next 5 years is massive. So you have these very specific small teams that have to be deployed over large geographies for relatively small sites. If you're not doing that efficiently as the contractor, you're losing your rear end. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no way to make money because every time that truck rolls, you're going to have a certain amount of money just getting a technician to site. So you better be super efficient while you're on site and while you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah, and it is different in that specifically. So we'd say at Conduit that the EV revolution that we're going through right now in the electrical industry specifically is high volume and high velocity. So there's a tremendous amount of projects. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of projects. Conduit has visibility to tens of thousands of projects ongoing simultaneously right now, right? That are happening or about to happen on the Conduit platform, and they're happening at a rate, at a velocity that is like way faster than most of these electrical contractors are used to. So they need tools to be able to do this. And so our largest customer, Miller Electric out of Jacksonville, Florida, they have started using Conduit as you were alluding to a few moments ago, share with their subcontractors. They don't, even though they are a massive company, they don't have the resources to tackle all of these EV charger deployments that have been thrown upon them.
So and that leads me to my next question, which is getting people to adopt technology in trades businesses historically difficult, right? We've watched construction software great technologies and software around construction software struggle to get market penetration because users at the basic levels just don't want to do it, right? They're going, I'm not getting paid anymore for this. I've always done it this other way, right? Is the common mantra. And that can be a real struggle. And then add on top of that, the structures that we're talking about, right? You have these national contractors that are going to use subcontractors who then have their own labor, right? And it has to kind of flow all the way through it. Now, I know that some will just say, you need to use this technology, probably rightly so. But at some level, you guys have to kind of get these folks comfortable with and, dare I say, excited about using your product. What have you guys done to try and help, increase that engagement, increase that adoption? Great
question. And we've had, we've struggled with this. Last year, we were really trying to go. You've got kind of two sort of go-to-market approaches. There are many more than two, but kind of from this perspective anyway, you've got you can go kind of top down. You can sell to the big guys, and they will force their troops to use it, or you can sell to the troops and like a PLG motion, product-led growth. Motion where you just like incentivize them to use it quickly and make it very obvious what the value is. I mentioned them earlier, but Figma is a really great example of product-led growth, to where the product kind of sells itself, and there's this network effect that makes it grow really fast. We've gone kind of in two directions. So we sell to these large contractors, but from the very beginning, we have built Conduit to be very usable, very accessible, and very understandable to the guys on the ground. It's got to work for them. That's the name of the podcast, but it's got to work. It absolutely has to work for them. Otherwise, they will throw it away and never think about it again.
I appreciate the sideways plug, by the way. Thank you for that.
No, that was unintentional, I promise. He's going to pay me. But they, it has to work. And we also, if you understand what a single line diagram is and the parts and pieces of a single line, which these electricians do, and you understand how to use an iPhone, you can learn Conduit in 20 minutes. And we've stuck to that. We also have a rule. So I just came up with these principles a few weeks ago, 3 of them in particular. And one of them is blue collars over white. We serve the guys on the ground. Of course, we have tools for the dudes in the office. But if we don't win, if we win the electricians, the guys with mud on their boots, then we win the industry. Hands down.
What's the other 2 principles?
The first one is electrons, not dollar signs. So we are not estimation software. We are not takeoff software. We are not scheduling software or dispatching software. We are electrical software. And I really made it so they are electrons over dollar signs, blue collars over white, existing over new. And I framed them in, we had an all hands a few weeks ago, and I framed these almost like a, like Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is probably the most correct one. It's not a law or a rule. It's a decision-making mechanism. And so I put together these 3 principles that really, as we grow, we were 3 people last year, and I've got 12 now.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to grow, and I need to be able to make sure that people understand kind of what the principles, what are some decision-making tools for in my stead. And in the stead of the executive crew. So I put together these principles.
Well, let's just stay on that blue collar theme for a second. To me, you guys very much have taken, and frankly speaking, continue to take a blue collar approach to selling Conduit in the field. Early on and continuing on even today, you literally go out in the field, you put an iPad or a tablet in the hands of a technician, of an electrician, and show them this is how you do it. You don't demo it via Zoom.
No, man.
You're not doing remote trainings. You're literally getting there, showing up in the nowhere, potentially, east of nowhere, to show them this stuff. Why is that so important? And how has that kind of been a guidepost for your approach to the market?
Yeah, so this is a delineation that I think a lot of people don't realize about the construction industry broadly. But these guys did not go remote during the pandemic. They never stopped. And
essential workers.
Yeah, they were essential workers. In fact, I don't know if anybody recalls, but construction was absolutely booming.
You couldn't get a skilled tradesman to show up. No.
Booming through that time. So they were working 70-hour weeks while the rest of not the rest of the world, but much of the world was at home, getting onto Zoom and learning how to work remote. These guys just continued to go more and more in person than ever before. And it really hasn't slowed down. Construction industry has just been absolutely exploding for years on end now. So they don't really care. In fact, they kind of have contempt for Zoom and emails. And frequently, if you want to get in touch with them, you call their cell phone, and they say, "I'm on a roof. What do you want?" Right? And that's and not to say that they're not friendly and they're excited to be working with a software that's being built for them, but they don't really have time to schedule a meeting and I'll be on this in my office for this half-hour Zoom. These guys are working, they're working, or they're managing guys that are working and they're in the truck all day, So you really kind of got to meet them where they are. And we started this very early on and learned so much about the customers as a result, and continue to learn. And it's one of the things that we're kind of putting into place as we grow and scale. Is I'm calling it the tag-along culture, where you have remote work and you have hybrid work, and you have in-person work. Well, we've got to go to our customers, at least for the first 100 or so. We're going to have to go and meet them and shake their hands. They kind of require that of us. And as a result of that, we learn a lot about their processes and what they're doing. And so now we're putting into a process where when a salesperson or a customer success person goes out to train or sell, they got to take somebody with them from the dev team, from one of the other teams. And they go and they may not contribute in the meeting, but they're going to sit in on it with the customer. And they're going to hear about what their gripes are. And then after the fact, they're going to go find them a whiteboard somewhere and debrief on what it is and make some plans and put some things together. And the idea is in person, but remote, right? With customers though. We got to go to see customers anyway. I think it's imperative that we expose the rest of the team to that and to each other.
One of the tangential benefits I would assume, especially around kind of the EV infrastructure, is everybody, including the contractors themselves, are still trying to figure some of this stuff out. I mean, this is uncharted territory. I think the people who are writing the specs for these charging stations are, I don't want to say guessing, that sounds really reckless, but no. I mean, there's going to be some assumptions that are made, and then you get on site, and just like anything else, it doesn't go the way that a designer who designed it from 1,000 miles away or 2,000 miles away thought it was going to go. And now it's up to the contractor or the technician to figure it out. And so you're on site watching this happen in real time, and then you start going, there's a couple of opportunities here. And I know that you guys have been, very responsive to that feedback and watching that happen. The second note, I would say, I really admire the fact that you're having people go out in the field. I know for me, one of the biggest leadership lessons I ever learned was actually when I was taken out of leadership and put among the folks that I was supposed to be leading, and literally in the field and in pretty rough circumstances, rain, cold, heat, right, messy, gross, whatever the case may be. And two things came out of that. One is certainly an appreciation for what folks were doing. That's kind of obvious and intuitive. But the other one too is that those people look at you differently now, right? Because they go, okay, well, when they say, I need you to do these things, they know what they're asking of us. They know they've walked in those shoes. For you, there's a huge advantage going out and talking with these folks because you've literally done this work, right? You've done it, and you've done it in some pretty severe circumstances, AKA offshore oil rigs. Not exactly the easiest place to work. So I would imagine that a lot of that comes out of this kind of as a tangential or secondary benefit.
Oh, it's absolutely invaluable. I mean, when I can walk into a place and talk the talk, and know their pain points and talk a very personal edge about this job I was on, or engage with them in the project that they're working on. It's what's made the sales over the last couple of years. So
I think it's important for anybody who's listening to this podcast who's a founder, especially a first-time kind of tech or software founder in that space. pivots happen at early stage. Early stage is kind of a breeding ground for pivots. And when I say pivots, I mean your product changes or your market entry point changes, or even maybe your customer segmentation changes and you go after a whole different group of people. You've talked about hearing from customers and then making changes to the product. Can you give a specific example of that so people can understand kind of what that feedback loop looks like? And then what do you do with that all the way through making that pivot or making that change?
Yeah, so we added something called load analysis, and I won't go deep into this, but we were we were with a potential customer. They weren't even a customer yet, out in Las Vegas. The first kind of wave of EV charger deployment, level 2 charger deployment particularly, was at car dealerships, right? Because it was kind of a mandate that came down where if you're going to sell cars, like Ford Lightning was a big one. Ford dealership, if you want to sell these Lightnings, which everybody wants one at this point, then you have to have a level 2 and a level 3 charger on site installed before you get one. So there was this mad rush for all these guys to get these EV chargers put in. So one of my customers out there, they're out there trying to like shoehorn 2 level 2 chargers into these old electrical panels out there. There's not really room for them. They're gonna have to kind of fake some stuff. This panel is from 1980 and it's jam full of stuff. And we had kind of cataloged everything with Conduit. We're looking at it, and I'm trying to kind of figure out what's downstream. And I realized, this is a lighting panel. What is the lighting? And I'll start tracing it out, and I realize, this is parking lot lighting. And it's still, they have not upgraded the LED. It's old, HID
So
lighting.
pretty significant power running through that.
Tremendous amount of power running through that, right? It's like old school stuff, right? That's like, it's a fraction to run LED lighting. And it's also a great upsell for this electrical contractor who's out there. And so what we were able to do, because we had an understanding of what was out there and we're able to make a couple of decisions, these guys not only installed these 2 level 2 chargers, they sold this place a lighting upgrade for their parking lot, and had space for another 10 chargers in the same panel. All of a sudden, we solved everybody's problems and everybody won, right? And so what we did after that was we put load analysis inside of Conduit such that you can actually put all the information in about this piece of equipment, or if you have some kind of meter on that piece of equipment, and then you can check to see if your new loads, your added kind of what we call proposed loads, like an EV charger, fit inside this piece of equipment. And then we have some basic tools to help model around that. And that was like just one example that was like pretty stark of the sort of things that these guys are facing out in the field, and what we can do to help.
It seems to be a recurring theme on this podcast where we talk about, the fastest way to a better product is to actually put it in the hands of users, and they will expose every weakness and break it in ways you could have never imagined while sitting there staring at code or staring at your UX UI. And so I think it's a really important lesson for people to keep in mind. So looking back on that, or looking back on starting this company kind of, proverbially at the kitchen table and then getting to the point that you are now, is there anything that you would have done differently in the early stages of building Conduit that you're prepared to talk about?
Good Lord. I've made so many mistakes. I think that I would have, and it's so hard to say what you would have done. But I think knowing what I know now, I would have made much more pointed investment in engineering up front. I was for a long time trying to sell an idea, and I sold it a lot. I sold it well, and I sold it a lot. But we really, and I think this is always the case, but we're dragging on product. We're like behind on product, and ultimately what we're building now, what we're like striving to get to, is what I've always wanted to build. We just haven't been able to get there. So I think, and talking to, we had a company in town that we're going to be partnering with out of New York yesterday, and they're at about our stage, and they have 3 times the developers, and I think that, and these guys are multiple exited founders. They've done this before, and they know they've got 2 of them and a whole stable of developers like just banging up on this product. And I think that's, if I were to do this again, it would be me and a whole stable of folks building the product.
Yeah, I would add to that just an idea of kind of order of operations, which is yes, building capacity around product and engineering, I think, is really important. I think you have to balance that against perfect being the enemy of good. And frankly speaking, slowing down your go to market, slowing down your revenue generation, because it's very easy to get into kind of the tinkerer's mindset, which is, yeah, but if this thing was just this little bit different shape, or that color was different, or this UX did something different, or this landing page did these things, or whatever the case may be. And then you get into the real weeds about like how your database is set up and like what's your server configuration and whatever. The point is at some point in time you can get paralyzed with, hey, I don't think this is as good as it can be, so therefore I'm not going to move forward.
For sure.
So I would say that's always a balance.
I think that I'm just necessarily am pushing product and engineering, and I am sales.
Yeah.
And I know what needs to be built, but just especially, it's one thing if you're building a Salesforce plugin, right? It's quite another if you're building like we were something we're building design software from the ground up. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It takes a lot of hands and a lot of brains working on it and time and resources. And like expecting for a long time, I really just, because I have I'm a first time founder. So I really expected 3 developers to get all this mass amount of work done, and it's literally impossible.
So you talked about the development. We've talked about kind of the velocity of Conduit, and it's been impressive, not just from a product development standpoint, but also obviously from a market perspective. And you have some really big customers and some great adoption now. What's next for Conduit?
So the next piece is we have got to get around the corner. We just hired the founding CTO of Bond Street. Before that, he was head of engineering at Venmo. We just raised a seed round, which we haven't actually announced yet. That allowed us to. We're hiring some hitters. So we're bringing in like a stable of very solid, very seasoned.
You heard it
folks.
here. We got a scoop on the podcast that no one listens to. Take that,
here first.
Business Insider.
So we raised the round. We're hiring a stable of like really solid, seasoned veterans in the venture-backed startup world, getting the product to where it needs to get to. And the next piece is really solidifying the go-to-market motion. So we've got kind of this affiliate deal, sort of channel sales through our customers beget customers, particularly on the enterprise side. And that's one thing that we're, in fact, one of my new investors introduced me to I talked to him this afternoon, the CRO over at Service Titan. And like, he's kind of helping us think through the sales motion towards these contractors and how to kind of grease those wheels, particularly as like a first mover, because we don't really have any competition. We don't have anybody in here. So we're kind of having to sort of invent it as we go. And
Well, and you've got an education component, right?
yeah, I mean, these guys, when we get in front of them, they couldn't have even conceived that this could exist. So they're not Googling for it. They didn't know that they could be the one building single line diagrams. This is just an engineer's job for AutoCAD. And when you give them those tools for the first time, it's really significant. But getting in front of them is difficult. That's where we found most of our traction and kind of top funnel stuff is at trade shows, in-person stuff, where we can like really put it in their hands.
So there's a real tribalism in trades around power tools.
Yes.
And you are of a certain camp, I mean, almost regardless. So, we're here in the heart of Alabama. The questions are always, are you an Alabama fan or are you an Auburn fan? But in trades, it's, are you a Milwaukee fan? I'm going to say it more strongly. Are you in the Milwaukee tribe? Are you in the DeWalt tribe? Or are you in the Makita tribe? So for our audience here, for any tool heads out there, for any tradespeople listening to this, what is your take on this? What tribe do you belong to?
So as a self-respecting electrician, Milwaukee, 150%. For those of you that don't know, Milwaukee has absolutely eaten the electrical industry alive. My journeyman, who's with R&R Electric here in Birmingham, owns every single thing that Milwaukee has ever made, including like the bottle openers, all the shirts and hats, the whole pack out set. he would buy his groceries from Milwaukee if they made them. So yeah, it's a big deal. I used to be DeWalt way back in the day, but we won't talk about those eras.
Well, that was back when it was DeWalt or Black & Decker. Those are your two choices.
Yeah,
Maybe Makita
obvious.
a little bit. But do you walk the walk? Do you have Makita equipment at the house?
I got Milwaukee equipment at the house.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I got a full set of drill set and a sawzall, and a bandsaw.
and then
Bandsaw,
of course in electrical hand tools, there's really only one company.
I don't know. There's like some others. So it used to be Klein.
Yeah.
that was.
I was
it.
thinking Klein.
But inline has been coming in. Is it inline? There's a couple of Nipix is a big one. So Klein used to be the one. I think it had to do along with Craftsman with like their like dropping of their lifetime warranty. That was that. Yeah.
So you heard it here, very much in the Milwaukee tribe. So any electricians out there, any technicians out there, the man knows his stuff. The man knows what side the bread is buttered on, as they say. So real quick, Ian, where can they find you? Where can people find Conduit? Online, on the socials, etc.
Yeah. So we're on most of the social platforms. You can find me probably most effectively, but don't send me don't send me a message on LinkedIn.
It may take a while.
Yeah, it may take a while. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Ian Hoppe, IANHOPPE. I publish some stuff on there from time to time. And then also our website at conduit, CONDOIT.io.
Ian, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.